Well, what do we might as well get started here, and where this
I mean, it's really nice.
where this is going to go, I have no idea. But to give you guys an idea, the reason I want to do this is because of the Sports Foundation, who put together Tanner Park. Okay, that we have a website, and there's a couple different things that we wanted to do. One was establish Tanner Park and get that field and stuff going. Another thing that we wanted to do is establish some sports stories that will preserve, and I guess, some of our athletic history. And then sooner or later here we're going to have a Hall of Fame, where it's Pana Athletic Hall of Fame. We talked to the high school about it. They're not interested in doing the high school Hall of Fame type deal, but so, because I didn't want to step on their toes. But they said, no, if you want to go ahead and establish a citywide or area, Pana area Hall of Fame, that would be good. So that's something that's on the burner, and we'll be working on. But right now, today, I want to go ahead and we'll introduce who we've got here today. Jack Hrabak and Ron Sims, Bill Bailey, and Larry Spinner over this side. And if that's the door's just open, there might be somebody else coming in.
Did you get Kasha out here?
Yes, Kasha, Havrilka. Sorry. What? And this is Bailey. Sandy.
This is Bailey, yeah.
Sorry, Kasha, I've got you cut out of the.
No problem.
Okay.
He's been cut out a lot.
Okay. But what I'd like to do is just go ahead. Let's see if I can get this around here. Now I got you all in here. But there's a lot of guys too that we're going to talk about today. Probably, are no longer with us. And if you got some stories that you can share about some of them and some of the people I'm talking about, maybe like the John Gruber or the Hrabak boys, those guys. And I know, Larry, you got a funny story about one of the Hrabak boys and George Clodney when he was catching. And maybe we just ought to start with that one. Why don't you tell us that story?
Well, it was, the Hrabak boys were always full of it and playing tricks, and everything was a joke for them. And Rich, I had just come back from playing ball, and Rich, I was showing him a couple of moves and everything on how to pick people off the fur, stuff like that. And I was a little bit out of shape, but they had me playing shortstop. And George Clodney was catching it, and George was, he was a good ball player, but somebody had to build a fire under him, he was relaxed, was one way. And Rich threw there was a right-handed batter up there, and Rich threw a curveball in there, and it kind of hung out high and outside. And George just reached up and caught it barehanded and threw it right back to him, And I was playing shortstop, and it took me a second or two to realize what happened. And of course, I just broke up, and then the whole team just broke up. Rich takes his hat off and shakes his head, a catcher catching him barehanded, was much for him.
Kasha, you were talking here before we got started about some of the guys that you played with. Pistol's Dufact can be with us today, but he's talking about Pistol's arm, and you played first base, baseball.
Yes, I played first base. Pistol was playing third base for the Blues at the time, and he was one of the few guys that could throw the ball from third base to first base that never dropped. Most guys throw the ball, and that ball will take a little drop before it gets to me, but he threw it on a line, and it was a straight line and just come across. I used to catch the ball heel of my hand most of the time when he was playing. Other guys that you're talking about, the guy that's not with us anymore, Sid Goodger's probably one of the best shortstops I've ever seen around. I just remember one time that Sid got a letter from the Cardinals to go try out for their farm system, and he didn't think he was good enough. He used to take that letter and hang it on the visor of his car and said, I'm just not good enough, I'm not going to go. So I don't know about that. One story I was telling earlier about Dean Rothrock from Shelbyville. We were playing Shelbyville baseball one Sunday afternoon, And he threw me a curveball. He was left-handed pitcher and I was left-handed batter. And he threw me a curveball and I just backed completely out of the box and he just stood out there and laughed at me. And I just thought to myself, I said, boy, you'll never back me out of that box again. So the next pitch he threw, I stepped right into it and he threw me a fastball. And it hit me right in the thigh and just left the seams of the ball right on the thigh of my leg.
I bet you said Mississippi. But the Rothrock name is synonymous with that Shelbyville and Stewart's and Strasburg,
Yes.
type area.
Yes.
You guys had, I think, in that time frame, you guys probably had the most or the funnest nicknames that I've heard of. And I don't know if you guys want to share any of the nicknames that were
Yeah,
prevalent out in those days.
I'll share the name Kasha with you. Larry was asking me earlier, and I know a lot of people like to know where I got that nickname. There used to be a guy in our neighborhood whose name was Kayai Brutowski. When I was a little bitty tyke, I was a little bit on the tongue-tied side, I used to call him Kaishai. And all my buddies and cousins and friends out there, they used to kid me about that Kaishai. They just turned into Kasha, and since that time it's been shortened to Kash. I do have a name. Most people that know me by Kasha, but my name is Don Havrilka, by the way.
Yeah, I had a rough time when I was looking in the telephone book and Don, what's this Don stuff?
So I'd say most of the people that know me probably don't even know my right name. So.
You guys talked about other guys' nicknames. Yappy Thomas. I don't know where the heck that would have come from, but I think I remember my dad telling stories about Yappy. Did Yappy like to hog catfish and that type of stuff?
Well, he had an older brother that they called.
Well, his dad.
That was his dad.
Who's his dad?
His dad and my Uncle Zach was river rats. Yeah, they've done a lot of hawking.
His dad was Yappy also.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's the one my dad was talking about then.
And he had an older brother they called Yappy too.
Don't you remember my Uncle Zach? Boy, him and Yappy Thomas, they were river rats.
Another story I remember too was, and I know my dad used to, when he got too old to play, he did a lot of umpiring for the Pana Blues. And there's one story that had to do with the Eppley Brothers, and I don't know which one was which that was doing this, but one of them was pitching, the other one was playing second base or shortstop, and they had a pickoff play going on. You guys remember that one? And turn around, and I think it was Larry was pitching, and Larry turned around and hit Jack. He in the pickoff play hit Jack in the nose with the ball and just laid him out colder than a cucumber. They had to get the ambulance out for him. He was bleeding pretty bad. But those are the types of things. I was just a little guy whenever I was watching some of that stuff happen. And you guys, what other nicknames are out there, or some other players that
How about old Mize? Worker, played first base for Eppley Shell. Mize, remember, Mel Worker. Where'd he get the name Mize?
and you don't know?
That's what we always called him. You ever hear him called that?
I don't know, I don't remember him.
You don't remember Mervyn Worker?
No.
Played for, you remember him, don't you, Kasha?
I remember, but yeah,
But he
lines
lived
part, I
over here
don't
on State Street, just down a block from Cotton, right there on the corner.
I know who you're talking about, but I
Yeah.
don't remember him.
But we always called him Mize, and where he ever got that name. Stickum Williams, where'd Stick get that name? Stickum.
Yeah, I know. No, so there you go. The Stickums, the Lee Giffens, who's
Yeah, well, league, but
they would just call him Giff, but
Just called him Give, right.
but
Scherzer. He played first base.
He used to play first base
For the bank.
Blues. Yeah, for the bank, yeah.
Softball.
Jack, you had a few brothers that played, didn't you? With it,
Not that much.
yeah.
Ron played second base, played softball with us.
Yeah,
That-
he played softball.
You guys played baseball and softball. Larry, did you play softball too? No softball for you? What's that? You couldn't hit the ball?
That was the weirdest game I've ever seen.
Well, a lot of guys did, and I don't know how you fit both of them in. I mean, I know it was tough for me whenever I was in high school. We'd had the American Legion team in baseball and tried to play there, but I really got into the fast pitch softball in town. And Bill, you were pitching whenever I first started.
It really is.
Of course, course, I'm a little different than Larry. I think that hitting the baseball helped me actually hit a softball. It made it easier for me to hit a softball than to hit a baseball because I don't know, that was just my case, but.
My college coach basically baseball coach told me if I wasn't going to go home and play baseball in the summer, that you know, I was too far behind. Then when baseball season rolled around that next spring for college, so you know, I just stayed with softball and played softball because that's what I played. That's what we played here. We didn't have any baseball because, but the Pana Blues. Anybody, you guys know how'd that team get started?
I don't know how it started, but I know how it ended. I played on the last team that was the Pana Blues. For 1 year, the Peabody Mine took over after that, played 1 year for them, and that was really the end of baseball for adults and Pana. I don't know how they got started.
What was the age limit or the age?
Wasn't any.
Well, or not limit, but what was the range of ages that played back then?
16 to 40.
16 to 40. At 40 years old, that's when.
I'd say at least like I said, when I started playing, Red Lesko was still pitching. It's quite spread between.
You played with us.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
But I said when I first started playing.
Oh, when you first started playing?
First started playing, Red Lesko was still.
Didn't know Mike Hunt kinda.
Well, Mike Hunt managed it for
He managed
a year,
it, didn't he?
couple of years, yeah.
So-
Mike Krivich played with the White Sox.
Oh, yeah,
That's the name I've heard.
He
Yeah,
managed the Blues for a couple of
yeah,
years.
yeah.
Mike Krivich did.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, when I was talking a while ago about that ballpark behind the mill out there, he was managing,
Is he in
the
here?
Blues then. And we were playing the Decatur not Merchant, but Decatur baseball team. And he hit a home run that was still going up when it went over that left center field wall. And he ran around the bases. And somebody in the stands said, "Boy, Mike," he says, "how'd you learn how to hit that low ball so much?" He says, "Well, when I went to the majors," he says, "I was a high ball hitter." He says, "So you better become a low ball hitter real quick. If you can hit the high ball, you're not going to get one." So he had to, adjust all the time. But he had a sad ending, but he was really a good guy. But about 10 years, I think, in the majors. Played in that, I think he played in the St. Louis Crosstown World Series in '44.
Oh, yeah.
I think he was with the Browns at that time. I'm thinking.
So, how old did you guys play? Kasha, how old were you when you finally
I
decided?
was probably
You-
5 years old when I finally quit.
And what made you? Why did you decide to quit?
There wasn't anybody my age playing anymore.
How about you, Jack? How old were you?
Well, I probably quit because I slid in the second one time and the guy come down on my leg. And I faced the game, but then the next I went to Dr. Fritz, and Dr. Fritz said, one thing to tell you, act your age and don't play any more ball.
How old were you then?
Oh, in the 30s.
Okay. Ronnie, how about you?
Well, I think when I actually quit with the Merchants, I was about 43. But then they pulled me out of retirement, and I think I played another year or so. But I started playing when I was, this guy here, Larry, was my Coat League coach. And we'd play Coat League, have a Coat League game, and then we'd hustle home on a Saturday or a Friday night or a Saturday night, hustle home, because we had to play fast pitch softball. And Butch Jones, we were 15 years old, and we had a young team, and Butch Jones was trying to pitch, and I tried to pitch, but we were a little wild. Finally, old Charlie Lesko said, "I'll pitch for you guys." Why would you doubt him? He can do anything else. And
You might want to tell us about Charlie Lesko. I mean, you bring up his name, but what was so special about Charlie?
Stubby.
Okay.
Stubby, they called him. Charlie, one arm, he'd play in the outfield, catch a ball, flip the ball up in the air, put it on, catch it, throw it in. But he pitched for us, and he could throw strikes. Well, heck, we started winning some ball games. And I played with him down at Ramsey Day part of the course. But no, that was played for Larry in Colt League, and then we'd come back and play fast pitch softball, and
He managed
I
that
played
last
until I was
team.
about 43
He
active.
managed that last team.
Played for the
Yeah,
Mercury.
Charlie was managing.
You know, Ron, I've got several funny stories to tell about you,
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
we're gonna,
I've been kicked out of my every ballpark in Central Illinois,
You learned that from Charlie, probably.
especially when they started picking on the good ball players like Marty Stupak and stuff.
I could probably find some good.
But, no, we had a good team, and then at the end, we had, there at one time, we had 10 fast pitch teams in Pana. 10 fast pitch leagues, and they'd always send us to the regional tournament down in Cowden. And Charlie got a hold of Chuck McCord, who was the president of the ASA at that time. He said, hey, we want to hold a regional. He said, we can have 10 teams in it. Well, that was unheard of. Oh, you can't have 10 teams. Said, I guarantee you will have 10 teams. So they made me commissioner, and they give us the regional that year, and we had 10 teams. And then we had, one year, I think we had a little more than that, but then we had all the league teams got in for us, and they didn't last, but it was a double elimination, and some of them would only get to play 2 games, that was it. But at least they made us have a better tournament, and then Pana held the regional for years until fast pitch just kind of went by the wayside. I think what hurt fast pitch was when the year we got second place in the state, they made us go AA, and we had to compete against the majors like ADM that year, and they kept us up, and they wouldn't let us come back down for several years. And we had to stay at AA, and it was hard to compete against them guys like Dave Scott and Stevenson. They brought from Australia, and they give them a job. And so but I had fast pitch was a good sport, made a lot of good friends. And you know, you still run into them, the Don Thompsons and them kind of guys that were from Cowden, and Tim Lau, from real good pitcher from Stewartson. I see them from time to time. Terry Plummer, you meet a lot of good friends.
yep.
This
And
guy down here at the end of the table, though, he was as hard to hit as anybody, and you could catch him barehanded. You couldn't hardly hit him. If you did hit him, you just popped it up.
Bill, when did you start in playing softball?
I started when I got out of service. I played for Mallory's when Mallory's had a team, and then played for Eppley's, Schultz team. We had some good teams and some good games.
And you and Virgil Alexander, didn't you guys play together on
Yeah.
Mallory's? Yeah.
When I started, though, I don't know if I played on the team that you were playing, or that you played on, or I played against you. I just can't remember that. I grew up with your son Dave, so how old did you play? How old were you when you finally said, "Hey, this is it for me"?
I really can't tell you. I was getting up in years, I know that.
Well, it seems like
I never could throw. I could throw as hard as I could, and that ball, fastest slow ball in the league.
But it seemed like softball pitchers they stuck around for a long time, a lot longer than baseball pitchers do, or really any of the other players. If you could pitch softball, you could probably stick around for a long, long time. Larry, how old were you when you gave it up?
21
You were 21 when you gave it up?
or 22, yeah.
Really? And you didn't play any more after that?
No, I didn't, not much, very little. Well, after I got through playing ball, I went to barber school, and I was afraid to break my fingers. And it would take, I had 5 or 6 kids at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And I just was afraid of my fingers. So I more or less just watched. I
Okay.
had enough of it anyway.
Yeah, and then I heard, I think I shared that story with you earlier, that my uncle, my dad had thought that you had what it took to be a Major League Baseball player
Well,
back in the day.
Some strong points, I guess, but the main thing you have to have is it in between the ears. And in all honesty, I didn't have it. I didn't have these
positive mental attitude.
Well, I have that you have to put things together. You know what I'm saying? And when they say you're in the zone, something like that, you have to pretty much be in the zone a lot when you're playing against really pretty good guys.
Yeah.
And I let things bother me. I got down, you know, and you can't do that. You have to kind of train your mental attitude to stay level. And it really shines up now when you watch golf on TV. Those guys, if they make bad shots or good shots, they look the same. So they got that mental strength is what you need, and I don't think I have that. And then not only that, but I had a very bad temper. And I don't want to get into some of that stuff. Well, if we're here to speak,
Yeah, we are.
I had a real good break in spring training. I don't know if you ever know Dick Stigman. He pitched for Minnesota. Well, we were in spring training, and we were kind of in what we call the boneyard. It's just people they didn't know what to do with. Well, they sent a runner over from the big diamond where all the big guys were playing. They needed a left-handed pitcher and a catcher. And I says, right here, and I grabbed Stigman. He was next to me. Well, I don't want to go over there. I said, yeah, you are. You're going to pitch, and I'm going to catch you. Well, I caught a really pretty good game, I guess. And the director of the minor league baseball, who had embarrassed me something terrible over a contract deal, and I just didn't like that guy. I mean, I hated him really over that, which was, you know, not smart. And when that game was over, he came up to me in the lounge afterwards and said, Larry, he says, you really got a fantastic game there. It was really good. They kept putting guys on first, and I threw out 5 of them in a row, going to the second, you know. And when he said that to me, all I had to say was, thank you, Mr. Brunel, I appreciate that. But what did I do? I just looked at him, I turned around and walked away from him. Never said a word to him. There was about 20 guys there, and I embarrassed him. Just don't do that.
Yeah, because there's probably a lot of people out there that are competing for those jobs, aren't there?
Well, one time when I was playing at Tifton, I dressed and I went out, and there was 5 guys on third base. I was playing third base at that time. There were 5 guys there trying out for the team. So I just wandered out in the outfield. But, yeah. So talking about Charlie Lesko, excuse me, Kasha.
Go ahead.
Talking about Charlie. Cotton, if he was here, he'd tell a lot of stories about Charlie. He said Charlie, he had a temper and fought, you know, argued a lot. And I was talking to Cotton about it one day, and he says, yeah, that Charlie, what an instigator. He'd get something started, everybody start fighting, and Charlie'd get off to the sidelines. He'd just get something started. But talking about his talent with one arm, that guy was amazing. And I was watching as a kid in the stands when he started playing with softball when he first started. And when they were playing these out-of-town guys, the first time Charlie'd get up, you know, they'd feel sorry for him. So they'd kind of throw it in there and bam, he'd hit that thing like a rocket. Yeah. And that was the last of that. After that, they treated him, you know, just like anybody else. But you almost forgot that he only had one arm. I mean, he was that good at about everything he played. And one more thing, there was a one-arm guy played with the Browns, Gray.
Pete Gray.
Pete Gray. Yeah. And Charlie, they found out about Charlie, and he played for the St. Louis Browns. And Charlie got to meet him one day. They called up Charlie, and somebody took him down to St. Louis, you know, because what Ron was talking on how he would catch a ball and, you know, and throw it. That's the way Pete Gray did it. And so that was a good deal for Charlie. He was a good man. Yeah.
Some years later, there's in more modern times, there's a pitcher for the New York Yankees. His name was Mike Abbott, Bill Abbott. Abbott was his last name. He graduated from University of Michigan, and he was, I mean, so baseball's a game I guess you can play with one arm, can't you? Or softball, or whatever. So, but I guess any of you got any more stories, guys, that you want to share? Anything special that Because then there's a couple other questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, I got one story that I'd like to tell. This was, we were playing baseball, and it was a Sunday afternoon. I don't remember who we were playing or what time of day or whatever. But anyway, the bases were loaded, and I was at bat, and Zip Goodger was on first base. And I wasn't noted for my speed, and Larry mentioned how so skinny he was before. I probably would run him a pretty good race, but anyway, I hit probably the longest ball I'd ever hit in my life, clear over the center fielder's head. Zip was on first base. I rounded first, and when I got to second base, Zip had already scored from first base, and I was just getting to second base. And I looked up, and here's the third baseman standing there holding the ball already. I went, oh. Charlie Lesko was managing it at the time, and he said, and everybody just laughed. I'll never forget that, just because of the fact that, like I said, the bases were loaded, and here this guy scored from first, and I couldn't even get hardly the second base in time.
If I may add a little something to that, I had a
Sure.
similar situation. I was playing at Keokuk, and by the way, if you want to check this out, I had the pleasure of playing with that team. I really feel fortunate. That's my only claim to fame. That there, a few years ago, some reporters researched the 100 best baseball, minor league baseball teams in the history of baseball. The top 100. And that team was 30th on the list. They were a bunch. But anyway, one day we didn't lose. We ended up 92 and 36 was our record that year. It was the best minor league record in the history of baseball until a couple of years ago. A team beat us. We had a 750 win-loss percentage, and they got a 751. Beat us by 1 point. So we're in second place. But anyway. Had the bases loaded, and I was up bat. We were losing by 4 runs, 2 outs, and I hit a ball up in between the left fielder and the center fielder, and as soon as I hit it, I said, "That's 3." So I took off around first, and I'm going to second, and I didn't even. My manager was over there going this, and I just tore around second. And when I finally looked up, about shortstop, the third baseman had the ball. So I just kept going. You know, what else did I go? So I went in there, and so I thought, on the way there, I said, well, I got to pull some kind of a trick slide in here somehow or another, you know. So I slid in, I put 1 foot out, and then when he was going to tag it, I pulled it back, and I reached over and I touched the base with my hand, and he actually missed the tag. And the umpire called me out. And I jumped up, and I was all over that umpire. And I says, "Were you crazy?" I says, "He missed a tag. He missed that tag." And he says, "Pal, if you think I'm going to call you safe on a play like that, you're nuts."
You know, when you're talking about that, it reminds me just a few days ago, Yadier Molina. And I don't know if you were watching that game because it was late and it was against the Giants, and it was Friday night. And I got frustrated. I went to bed. I woke up the next day. Yeah, and well, I didn't look at the score until noon because I was sure they lost. They came back and won that game. But that night in that game, I don't know if you guys saw that play or whatever, but Yadier they hit a ball to third base. There's runners on, he was on third with 1 out. They hit a ball to the third baseman. Yachty's going on contact. They start chasing him down. He turns, instead of running to home, he turns and starts running to the pitcher's mound. And I thought, why would he do that? So they stopped. He was immediately rolled out. And they got Piscotti. He was the one at home plate that hit the ball. And they threw him out at second base, so it was ending in a double-A. But I'm thinking, I'd never seen a Major League Baseball go that far. I mean, it was like he was running to the pitcher's mound. It was funny.
Yeah, I saw that.
You saw it?
What was his idea of doing that?
I had no idea. I
The
haven't.
announcers didn't say why?
At that time, I was getting frustrated, and I went to bed. I thought, I'm going to bed. That's enough.
They said he was trying to hold out long enough for that guy to get the second. You know, they hadn't tagged him, but they didn't have to tag him really because he was at the far out of the baseline.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that. I guess I want to go down through all of you here and ask you a couple questions. And one is, okay, number one, who's your favorite baseball player of all time?
Well, Mine would be, have to be Stan Musial, I guess maybe because I was left-handed and he was left-handed, but I just followed, I mean, his career when I was younger until he retired, and to me, he was my favorite baseball player.
Okay, who is your favorite baseball player, or maybe not necessarily your favorite, but one you looked up to most in Pana?
In Pana, boy, I don't have an answer to that. I really can't say.
Okay.
All I can say is that Larry was talking about Charlie Lesko earlier, and Charlie Lesko was the guy that actually got me interested in playing ball, and so maybe Charlie would have to be maybe my favorite player. I don't know. So yeah, he was good for his.
Good enough. That's a tough one to come up with. I mean, if I'm sitting here and I'm saying, who was my favorite baseball player, or baseball, softball player from Pana, I probably would have to say my brother. But just because, you know, we grew up playing baseball and softball and whatever, and he was a special talent. But Jack, how about you? Who's your favorite Major League Baseball player?
Probably Joe DiMaggio.
Got a hit streak record that may never be broken.
And he married Marilyn Monroe too, so he.
That's probably the dumbest thing he did. Maybe the smartest and the dumbest thing he ever did was marry her.
But there's just too many good players, I think, here in Pana, and I just can't pick one better than another, or.
Well, what I'm looking for, though, is maybe that special person that made a difference to you while you were playing, or whatever, that was kind of like that best buds, or, you know, type person.
Who made a difference to me was probably my dad.
All right.
When we'd go home from the ball, get down to the park, and lived in the north end, and he'd have all kinds of things to say, you know, like, you get rid of that ball, you can't eat it, it's not good to eat, you know, and you go, or why didn't you, or you're holding on, you know, and I think so-and-so's lucky, he don't have to get chewed out.
Ron, how about you? Who's your favorite Major League Baseball player?
Without a doubt, Stan the man.
Stan the man. What about when you were growing up? Some of these guys were. Charlie Lesko would be your.
This guy here too, by taking a bunch of young kids in Colt League after we got out of Pony League, but Charlie too, and I was I think might have been in my senior year when Charlie was student teaching at Pana. He come from Eastern, he was doing his student teaching at Pana, and he just kind of, us guys just kind of, we knew him, and he just kind of took all us kids under his wing, and even after we got out of school, it was softball, doing together, and even for years until he died.
But he also coached St. Pat's basketball.
Yeah,
team.
oh yeah, I
And took him to.
back when George played, Claude,
Almost
them boys,
undefeated season.
Danny Pastor.
BD Lees.
Yep. Yeah.
Bill, how about you? Favorite Major League Baseball player?
Really, I never watched baseball that much. I mean, I wasn't into baseball, but Musial was always, because I was always a Cardinal fan.
Well, Musial's a good place to start, that's for sure. I mean, it's not a whole lot better than him. And what about anybody in softball or baseball that made a difference to you as you were growing up when you got started in it? Person that maybe got you started first? And
Not that I mean, not that I can recall right now, because I can't remember half the stuff.
and I'm putting you on the spot. I should have given you guys notes or something to talk about or think about before you came, but the improv is a lot nicer too, though. So, Larry, how about you? Favorite Major League Baseball player?
Well, I think although Stan, I was a Cub fan when I was younger, but we would always go to St. Louis to watch doubleheaders, and Stan never ever disappointed. I was a Stan Musial fan, because he would go 5 or 6 for 9 just about every doubleheader I went to, and he was a hitter. But I'm going to pick Babe Ruth. He not only hit his 60 home runs, but I think the rest of the league didn't hit that many. He hit more than the rest of the, and then he was, his World Series pitching record lasted for years and years. So I think I'll pick him. And for the local guys, I'm gonna pick my relatives. They were all ball players. Skinny Spinner was a catcher, and Lemons was a second baseman. Cotton pitched and played first and wherever. And I used to go out even when they practiced, and they would let me have batting practice with them and infield practice with them. I was only like 13 years old, you know. So those guys inspired me more than anybody.
Good answer. One of the things, you know, you guys are talking about who's your favorite baseball player and that type of thing. And Stan Musial is a fantastic answer. I'm Babe Ruth. How can you? Babe Ruth was one of the first 5 people that went into the Hall of Fame. Can you guys name the 5 first installments into the?
Gotta be in there.
Who?
Ty Cobb.
Ty Cobb was one of them. Babe Ruth.
Honus Wagner.
Honus Wagner was in there. Pitcher.
Have to be Cy Young.
Cy Young made it the second time around. He didn't make it, which is very surprising to me that he didn't make it the first time. But there was a pitcher in there, 2 of them, 2 more pitchers.
Matheson,
Christy Mathewson.
another pitcher?
Yep. The Big Train.
Oh, yeah.
Liz?
No.
Wait a minute, Big Train. It's got me.
Walter Johnson.
Yeah, Walter Johnson.
Didn't they call him the Big Train?
Yes, they did.
So, you know, those guys, and I was just reading up on the Hall of Fame here not too long ago, and I was really surprised. Well, I knew the first 5, and I'm thinking, why did Christy Mathewson how could he not have made that first ballot? He went over 500 games. 500 games, and then the other thing, when I started doing some math, the number of innings pitched, the number of games that he pitched, you know, you divide those together, and you'll get an average innings. You know what that he averaged out to? 9 innings a game.
Yeah.
9
He
innings.
lost, I think, close to 300.
Yeah. So, I mean, but, you know, what an amazing feat. But as I was saying about, Stan Musial being a good choice. For me, whenever I was growing up, Stan Musial had already pretty much retired. And I don't know when he retired. Was he retired in 64 or something like that? But, anyhow, the guy that I remember seeing playing, and that I hated to see him play the Cardinals all the time. I'm a big Cardinals fan, but I think that I had respected and admired the most was Roberto Clemente. And Roberto had, you know, he died in a plane crash helping on a humanitarian effort. But I thought he was a great ball player. And then
He had no strike zone.
yeah,
Yogi Berra, you know, they didn't know how to pitch to those guys because they hit anything that looked good.
And speaking about an arm, my God, what an arm! He was 39 years old, still playing right field and throwing people out. What a talent! But what else can we talk about here, guys? I'm kind of running out of.
I have,
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, talking about baseball team, her best friend was Paula Dixon. She married Kenny Hearn. And we went up there to visit him. Oh, yeah, I said, I played baseball for Pana. And he lived up in Decatur. It just kind of amazed me that they stretched out that far.
Yep, I know when we were playing softball, Ronnie, we had some guys that we'd pick up from Decatur or Mount Zion or wherever that wanted to play on a decent softball team, and
They still do it, by the way. Some of my people I talk to play, and they get guys traveling miles and miles to play all that.
you started to say something else here, Larry.
Oh, I was going to say a while ago, you know, you're talking about that Sports Hall of Fame thing you were getting, and I haven't heard many people talk about this, but I still talked about this in my barber shop when the Line football players, the Seegert boys. There was Herb, Wayne, and Rudy, and all 3 of those guys were the captain of the Illinois football team.
Oh, really? I was not aware of that.
Yes, and that's quite a deal on as a family. Well, Rudy was Herb and Wayne were brothers, then Rudy was nephew. But I can tell one story about Rudy real quick. It was the first game. I was a freshman quarterback, And Rudy was a sophomore. Of course, back then they had the freshman sophomore games, you know. And I was green as could be. I didn't know anything about football. And we had a few basic plays that we were running. And Shelbyville came to town as our first home game. And the game had just started. I mean, we ended up, we were on the Shelbyville's about 20-yard line. And I called some kind of a play and come back to the huddle, and Rudy, he was a tackle, left tackle. And he said, Spinner, call a T-22 or whatever, which was just a quick opener right over him. So I thought, well, he's seeing a weakness or something, you know, so I called that. And the ball was snapped, and I give it to the left half, and he went into that line, a big pile up, and they come undone, and there was the opposition tackle laying on his back, and the blood was just shooting out of his nose. And he was down. And the coach came out and looked at him, and he says, come on, boys, off the field. He says, we don't play that way. So the very first game I played out there in football was a forfeit against Shelbyville. And the game hadn't been 2 minutes, 3 minutes old. They walked off. That was Rudy did that one. He was a rough character, boy.
You mentioned Rudy Siegert. I worked with a guy over Dickie John at Auburn from Kincaid. His name was Bill Lindsay. He played against Rudy in football. And he said that Rudy Siegert was one of the cleanest, best players he'd ever played against. And he went to U of I with the same year Rudy did to play football. And he never made it. He never made the varsity. And he finally quit his sophomore year. But he said he remembers playing against Rudy Siegert. And he said he's one of the best football players he'd ever played against.
Oh yeah, he was tough.
Speaking of Rudy Siegert, though, he's related to you, Joe Stolitz.
Yes.
He was telling me one day that he was playing fullback, I guess, or something for football. They were out of practice one day. They handed Joe the ball, and he ran to the line, and here's Rudy Siegert and Don Ryan were standing there waiting for him. He said he just threw the ball up in the air.
He threw the ball at him. He threw. I was there.
Oh, you were there.
And he threw the ball right at him. He said,
I've heard that story. My uncle told me, my uncle told me that story before.
yeah.
So,
And then we was kidding Joe a lot too, you know, but we were doing calisthenics out there, you know, in practice, you know, and we were doing sit-ups. And we were laying back doing our sit-ups, you know, and the moon was right up there, and the clouds was going by, and Joe says, boy, look at that moon go. So we got a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun out there.
and
We're talking about Rudy Seeger. When I came from Roseman, transferred, you know, when I was sophomore. I didn't play football first year, and they talked me into going out senior. Well, I'm like you, I didn't know a dang thing about football, but we went to Kincaid, and Bert Nino or something like that hit Rudy Seeger in the mouth and knocked his 2 front teeth out. That's enough for me, and he went right back in and played the rest of that game. No, but his teeth knocked out. I mean, he was.
Rudy knocked my tooth out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basketball, on a rebound, he went up and come down with an elbow and hit me right in the, well, it didn't knock it out, it just knocked the chunk out of it.
so were you guys playing with masks on then, or no?
No,
No masks. Oh, okay. So
we was lucky to have pads.
that makes a difference. And what we're going to do too, we started to get into some football stuff, and there's a lot of great football stories out there and basketball. And we're going to do this with the different sports too, and try and get them together, get people together, and just share these stories because.
Here's one of the good ones right here, Bill. He could shoot that ball, man, I tell you. It was really a good shot, boy.
In basketball, huh? And Bill, you talked about Roseman, being at Roseman. How at that time, my mom graduated from Roseman High School, okay, but at that time, I'm assuming it wasn't a high school there. How late did you go to Roseman?
I was a sophomore. I graduated in 50, and in 48, I think it was.
But did they still have the high school at Roseman at that time?
It's a Baptist school now. but-
No, I mean back then. Was it still a 12-year high school?
Yeah.
And you transferred into Pana then?
When I played basketball at Roseman, we had 11 guys, I think, or 12. That was about the limit. And part of them played second team and part of them first team. I know I got to play when I was a freshman with all seniors. But,
Yeah, but 11 guys on a team from a town the size of Roseman, it's not too bad either.
yeah.
Really isn't. So, well, guys, I appreciate everybody coming today, and I'll tell you what, I'd stay, however long we stay, I'd stay that amount of time too, yet to talk to you. And is there anything I'm sure we just touched on the edges of things, and what else can we talk about in as far as baseball and softball and Pana's history? I know you see a lot of these high school programs now that the T-Towns and a lot of these teams that have Greenville's got a good baseball program. Hillsboro's got a decent baseball program. Pana's baseball program has kind of waned in the last several years, and for whatever reason. But a lot of these other towns play junior high baseball and that type of stuff. We don't have junior high baseball in Pana. That may be part of the reason. We just don't have as great a commitment at the younger level as we did at the upper level. But when you guys were playing, Pana was a pretty formidable group of people as far as playing baseball. And Ron, you look like you're going to say something.
Back when I managed the Merchant, we played league ball, but then we developed, probably midway through my career, a little past midway, me and Ron Sinclair took over managing the Merchants, and then he retired, and I had him for quite a few years, and probably one of the best softball players. I'm not just saying this because it's Al's brother, but Marty Stupak, probably one of the best softball players I played with. He was a hard out. He didn't hit the ball long, but if that ball was hitting fair territory, about 95% of the time he was on base. And then when we brought the left-hander from Decatur down, the first shot, I don't know if you remember going down to Cowden our opening game that year, we had Larry Schultz come pitch for us. And he played, he had retired and played double-A ball. And he had retired, and I worked with him at Caterpillar, and I talked him in coming down and playing with us. I said, just come on and pitch a little bit, because he was originally a first baseman. And so he pitched. The very first game against Cowden, we go down there and play him. He throws a no-hitter at him. Throws a no-hitter. He's a left-hander, and then we've always played double-hitter. We go to the dugout and get ready for the next game. He goes in and gets his right-handed, a left-handed glove. He goes out and plays second base. He's throwing right at it. He can throw it either way.
And turn a double play. Turn a double play in that game.
Yeah.
But
Overall, I think probably, and I've played with some awful good ball players here in Pana. Our Merchant team had a lot of good players on it, but I think Marty Stupak was probably, in my time, he was probably one of the best softball players in this area. And he proved out. He went on and played major fast pitch and for Bloomington Hearts, and
made the all-world team.
When they had their big tournaments, he made all-tournament team and played, nationals.
Yeah. You talked about Larry Schultz, and I guess one of the things that Ron had always told me about this guy, 2 or 3 years, this guy, I tried to get him to play. And one of the reason he quit, well, he was developing a martial arts studio, okay, but there at Caterpillar, he had an accident and he got something
Got hit in the eye. Little Allen wrench flew out and he got hit in the eye and blinded him in one eye.
And he was blind in one eye. When he came out, he brought those old wooden bats that he played with, and we're playing with aluminum bats and stuff, and he brought the old wooden bats that he had used. But I remember he had a taekwondo studio in Taylorville, and I was working in Taylorville at the time, and he wanted somebody to play some catch with him. And okay, well, I'll get my glove and we'll go out there in the spring of that year. And we went out to Manners Park there in Taylorville, and he was throwing to me. And he started throwing pitches, and I'm thinking, I'm afraid for my life at this point, I mean, I've never seen anybody throw a rice ball that would jump the way his rice ball would jump, and I'm thinking, oh my God, we got something here. You know, I went home, I was just laughing all the way home because I'm thinking, we got something here. And we did. Larry was a horse. I think he was 36 at the time, and a bunch of us were all 21, 22-year-old guys or younger, and you wouldn't have known he was 36.
I gotta tell a good softball story though. What would this kind of thing be without anybody mentioning the old Beaver, Billy B?
Yep.
We're playing in a regional tournament down at Cali. I can't tell you what team I was playing. Butch Jones, we were younger. Butch Jones was pitching that night. And we were playing Van Day, and they had Ron Thuverman come up and pitch. And they paid him to play for their team. And we sent Beaver to the plate. And Bill gets up there, and this Thuverman, he's all business. He was a big guy. He was probably 6'2", 6'3". And old Bill goes up the plate, and I'm telling you, that Thuverman threw a fastball in there, and Bill didn't even see it. Bill just kind of jumped back. Boy, I thought, oh my gosh. I said, Butch, didn't you tell this guy about Bill? You know, we'd always let Bill hit a home run. All the other teams always loved to have Bill come up and hit a home run on him. Well, anyway, this Thuverman threw another one, strike, and Bill bailed out again on it. The third pitch, the umpire called a ball, and that Thuverman stared at the umpire. Next pitch, he struck Bill out. Bill never got the bat off his shoulder. He come walking back in the dugout, and he said, I was taken all the way.
Yeah, Billy, I'm glad you mentioned Bill, because he was sure he was a good story in this. So.
Yeah, he's part of the ball culture of Pana. Yeah.
Okay.
He was always talking to me about basketball. You know, we'd let him dribble around that. He said, yeah, I played over somewhere. He said, that guy was 6'12".
Let me ask you guys this. What was the most memorable moment? And we'll go around. We'll start with you, Larry, since we won't put Kasha on the, but the most memorable moment in Pana sports history for you.
Memorable? Oh, man, in Pana sports history.
Pana sports history. Not necessarily just baseball, but Pana sports history.
The most memorable, what I remember the most?
Uh-huh.
Well, I think when I was a kid in grade school, was when Don Cully and all those Harold was on the team. They really had a good team there, and I think it was they beat Hillsborough twice in the season, and then they went over there, and 4 of the 5 guys had to leave and had to stay home, and the only starter was Cully. And Hillsborough beat them in a sectional finals or something like that. Beat them by about 2-3 points. And that was with, Pana had 1 starter on there. And then Hillsborough went up and won second in the state. And that team right there, Buzz Overlot and I were just young kids, and we'd be standing at the north door, and when that door opened, we would show our season pass, and we'd cut across that floor, and we'd get up that little balcony up there. And we would stay and just watch that team. And right now, it escapes me who was on that team. I don't know if you guys remember that or not. That was what I remember, and I was just really impressed with that team.
Bill, how about you? Number one moment in Pana sports history for you that sticks out in your mind? Doesn't necessarily have to be a championship team or anything like that. Just something special that you remember.
You're talking about Don Cully. I mean, to tell you, when he threw the ball, you better be looking. I mean, I never saw a guy. I played when I first came in. I mean, to tell you, he threw that ball, it hit you like a ton of bricks. I mean, you better. He could fire that ball.
And do it all in one motion.
Yeah, right, right. He was, can't think the other guys. Warren, Dale Warren.
Dale Warren, boy, he was a hot shot.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the guys. Dale Warren, Buck Warren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warren, Cully, Hall,
Oldie, yeah.
Red Oldie.
he might
Oh,
be
boy.
on there.
Yeah, that's another
Yes.
name there. Ron, what about you?
Have to be the 1988 Charlie Strasburger's state championship basketball team. Of course, I had a son that was a junior on that team, but that would have to be the highlight of any sports for me. And I've seen some undefeated football teams, but I think the '88 championship basketball team,
I'd have to agree with you on that. That's our one and only championship Pana's had. And what a ride that was. That's for sure. Jack, what about you?
No, nothing I could think of right now, but,
Kosh, what about you?
Well, Ren Oldie's name was mentioned when we were sophomores. He was playing safety. This was in football, and we were playing Taylorville, the last game of the year. And Pana was undefeated up until that point. Oldie was playing safety. Taylorville, the very last play of the game, Pana was ahead. This guy by the name of Monk Wilson was playing quarterback for Taylorville at the time. And anyway, Oldie was, like I said, he was playing safety. And they faked the run play, drew Oldie in, they threw the pass over where Oldie had just left the territory and scored a touchdown and beat Pana on the very last play of the game. I just remember that. So.
You know, you talked about Rinaldi, and of course he had some sons that were pretty good ball players. His oldest son, Ren, was a stellar performer, and then it would have been his grandkids. Philip Arnold is another one that comes to mind. That was just, and this is over the last few years. Philip was a very special football player too. So Ren he left a long root system of good athletes in his family. That's for sure.
I'll tell you, Ren Oldie was a guy that, I mean, he gave 110% of everything he ever played in.
He had a unique playing style also because he was always yelling and talking on the floor, yelling and.
Kind of like Meadow Lark Lemon, huh?
Yeah, he was. You remember that, Kasha? He'd get out there and he would just constantly just on the opposing team and yelling and screaming out there while he's playing. You know, he just had a unique style.
Even after he graduated, I mean, he was at all the games and he was
Oh,
forever
boy.
yelling at everybody all the time.
And the thing I remember about Ren as a referee, he was the most unbiased referee that I've ever seen in my life. No, it seemed like every time Ren and Art Kronchagen were refereeing, people come over here and they thought, oh boy, we're going to get it tonight. But,
I can tell a story about that one.
well, go ahead.
It's
That's
not
what we're
very
here for.
good- It's not very good for Rand, but I was a referee. Art Kronchagen, I was one of his students also. And Pete Davis was manager of Benny's store. And I didn't see this game, the varsity game, but I guess Pana went to Effingham. And the referees really must have ripped them up good, and Pana got beat. I was barbering downtown there at Dressings. And of course, across the street was George's coffee shop, and they, it was all uptown coaches were there all the time, you know, and I'd go over there for coffee once in a while. And Ren and Pete was in there, and they just come out and said, boy, if you think we got ringed over Effingham, come out to the game tonight, because Effingham's freshman or sophomore.
it was a freshman-sophomore game.
Freshman-sophomore game, come out, and you're gonna see something. And it was Ren and Pete Davis were refereeing that game, so I thought, I'm gonna go to that game. And so, Effingham was, I think, pretty close to undefeated, and Pana probably should have gotten beat 30 points at least by that team. And so, they got ready to tip off, and they threw the ball up, and the Effingham kid tipped it over to another kid, threw it to a kid on a fast break down to the basket. Nobody within 15 feet of him, and Ren called him for traffic. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a dandy. And that was just started, and as the game went on, it got worse got worse and got worse, and Pana was leading most of the time. And I'm sitting across on the very bottom seat, and I'm looking over at their coach and Pana's coach. I can't remember who it was. But they were down here, they were screaming at one another, screaming at one another. And so it just got bad and bad and bad. And pretty soon Barry Heaton, who was the superintendent, or no, he might have been the principal or the superintendent. I think it was principal. He come walking in that side door and he sat down. He didn't know what was going on. He just came from outside and he came in and sat down between the Pana coach and the Effingham coach. And so this Effingham coach started yelling down there at him, and Barry starts looking around, so he starts yelling back at that guy. And pretty soon, Barry gets up and goes down there. And he's standing over this guy, and the guy must have said something, and then boy, the fist started flying. And Barry just buried that guy in that seat. I thought, boy, that guy's stupid. For just, at least he should have got on his feet first. So finally, justice prevailed, and Effingham made a basket right at the end, and they won the game by, I don't know, 1 or 2 points, something like that. And so when the guy goes running across the floor to their dressing room, he yelled over at Heaton and those other guys, and he made a kind of an obscene gesture at them. And on the way out, and Klosterman, who was our Pana's coach when I was a senior, was the coach over, or the athletic director at Effingham. They got that guy fired. And I thought, they fired the wrong guy. They should have fired Aldi and Pete Davis, because they really did. That was a night I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Ron, you must have.
Well, I did, you know what, I remember where I was at that night. I went to friends of ours, and went to our church. They had a Sunday school class party. And I felt I had to go out there to that, and I missed that. My dad went to it, but he was telling me about it, but yeah.
It was shameful.
Yeah, we should have got beat, like you said, by 30 points. They were that much better, and it took the last shot to beat us. I think that ended I think that was Ren's last game too. I think he ended his career on that.
That was a good decision.
Oh, well.
Well, it's a lot of these stories that unless you sit down and you start talking about them, you forget about them, or you may be thinking about it as you're driving out of town or in your car or something, and maybe you get to laughing at them. Like I said, Ron, there's a few stories here that I'll laugh till the day I die about old Ron.
They like to pick on him.
That's because they like you so well.
Well, we do. And I hope he knows that. But
What I'd like to do, I'd just like to thank Al for at least calling this together. I'm disappointed there wasn't more guys showed up for it, but I think we've all had a good time, and I think we've all enjoyed hearing a lot of these stories that took place, and thanks, Al, we appreciate it.
That's
Okay.
for sure. Thank
you guys, I'll make a copy of this, and you guys can play it for your families or whatever. And like I said, these are types of things that I'm going to compile and put into, if I can get the actual DVD on, or the presentation loaded into our website, I will do that. And then you guys can look on the Pana Education, or Pana Sports Foundation
When I talked a
website.
while ago about, I felt like one of the best softball players come out of Pana in my day was Marty Stupak, but Larry and these guys here, we don't want to leave out old Giff.
Yeah.
Man, oh man.
Lee
that
Giffen,
guy.
that's right, was,
I mean, when I was playing in my younger days, man, that guy, and he brought him out of retirement, throwing that ball behind his back for a strike and everything. Well, he was a class pitcher.
Who was that?
Lee Giffen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
He could throw hard. I played ball with him for a lot of years, and
Yeah.
he threw harder than anybody I ever.
He'd always pitch the second game, and he'd get there about 5 minutes before game started, and he'd get out of the car and just kind of shake his arm a little bit. That'd be about all the warming up he'd do. He'd ready.
Well, when he did warm up, he'd get back to second base and throw strikes across the plate almost as hard as he could
That was
Pretty expensive.
kind of like the King in His Court. You guys remember the King in His Court?
Hello.
Gosh darn it, what was the guy's real name though? I had a DVD that I bought on him.
I'm up here at old-time softball meeting there.
Not, gosh darn it, I can't remember what the guy's real name was, but they called him the King in His Court.
Yeah.
And he traveled around the country.
Other ball players, and that's all he had.
He had a catcher, a shortstop, and a first baseman, I think. That boy,
From second base, I never saw him. but-
pitch with a blindfold on. Yeah, and it
King in his court.
wasn't Virgil.
I remember him also, but
Yeah, I can't remember what his. I hate that, but I can't remember what his real name was. Kasha, you got a picture there of a bunch of ball players. You want to name them? And
well, the guy in the back row on the left is looked like Mike Hunt's dad, Ray Hunt. Bruce Maish. That's the guy you said.
Yeah, Dean.
Dean Law, Ronnie Byers, Arlington Averill, Yappy Thomas, Ron Lesko, Chubb Barding, Joe Stupak.
That one I don't know, and this one I can't remember.
Yeah, those two guys here. Yeah, this guy was on the picture earlier, and I don't remember who he is. Gene Schmitz, Ron Lesko, Jack Roebuck, Mike Hunt, Ralph Gutierrez, Zip Dudra, Kasha Broca, and Ron Roebuck. Yeah, I don't remember what year that picture was taken, but
Yeah, I
you
can't
said
remember
Charlie.
either.
Kasha, you brought a picture in earlier to me.
Yes.
And I think at that time, you guys were, I'd have loved to have been a part of that team because you guys, I think at that time it was a 100-year celebration or something like that in Pana.
Oh,
The
yeah, we all
Centennial.
had beards
And everybody
and
had beards, and you guys had the worst beards in the world. So, I mean, I would have fit in great with that team because I can't grow one. Okay, but I thought, man, alive, that's, you guys, those weren't very good beards there. But, no.
You know, when I played for Assumption one time, we went up to a little town to Decatur, and they had a blind pitcher.
Yeah, Abe was his first name.
Yeah, and he had, one of the fielders stood right beside him, because he couldn't see the ball. If he hit it coming back at him, he couldn't see the damn thing. But that son of a gun could throw that ball. I mean,
He could
blind,
see a shadow, but he couldn't.
amazement.
Did you go with us?
You remember his last name, Al?
Prison.
Abe?
Abe, from Hammond, wasn't he?
Hammond.
He was from Hammond.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, he was from Hammond, but I can't think of his last name.
It was with Mike's team.
There was a lot of characters in fast pitch softball that you saw. The Dodsons.
Yeah.
You know,
Joe Stupak was,
You know, my old,
he's running late.
boss,
So,
Phil,
he had
Bud
work.
Dresden,
So we
his
stopped,
half-brother was,
and then he went on.
Charlie?
and,
Charlie Dresden,
He came back, you know.
managed in the majors
he had
for
a-
25
old
years,
man,
and
Riley,
Charlie Dresden was
that
in,
must
on
not
the
take
original
or something.
Bears team, a team that was Staley's.
uh-huh.
They played 1 year in Decatur called the
Decatur Staley's.
Bears,
And-
and Charlie Dresden played on that team, and when they transferred to Chicago, he played a couple more
You
years.
better be careful,
So he was a
stay on your toes, you
player.
know, because
And,
if he kills you, it doesn't matter, because that's
he
all he got
went into
here.
baseball, managed for years.
Was he a Hall of Famer? Baseball Hall of Famer or no?
I don't think so.
But Nokomis got several guys that made it into the Hall of Fame. Jim Bottomley was one. Red Roofing,
Yeah, I know
another.
him. I knew Red. And the only guy that, on the Black Sox that didn't get in the scandal was, the catcher. And I always have trouble with his name. But he's in the Hall of Fame. That catcher is.
But Shoeless Joe is
Red
not.
Red Ruffing, and I would challenge anybody to try to find another town the size of Nokomis and find 3 Hall of Famers from that town.
Amazing, yes. I agree with you.
But Red Ruffing was, I'm not gonna tell that story. We've got no time, but anyway, he was a troubleshooter for Cleveland when I was playing with, in the minors. And he was a tough nut, and people didn't like to sit around him because all he would do was cry that he wasn't in the Hall of Fame yet. He deserved it, you know. Everybody just, oh, come on, Red. He finally made it, so good for him.
Yep.
He was a tough nut, boy. But he was good. He was, he would pinch hit for the Yankees a lot of times. He was a pitcher for 'em.
Well, we've thrown out a lot of different names, and I'm sure there's people that we have forgotten about. The Sleepy Kleins, so the names that come to mind. You know, Sleepy, a professional football player. The Siegerts, you know, and all their the people that they had in professional sports. Butch Nowak, arguably probably Pana's most decorated or most famous football player with his success that he had in high school and college football, that's for sure. But
Guys that aren't here today, the Eppley Brothers, there's three of them that played a lot of ball in Pana. And I wish a couple of them would have showed up today. So.
yeah, that's and Jax lives in Arkansas or whatever, and I had contacted him. Jim's he's got some commitments out the fair, and then Larry was going to be out of town. So yeah, I think the Eppley Brothers would have brought.
Jack was one of the toughest competitors Pana's ever had, I believe.
You know, I've heard some stories about him, especially when we were talking about the 100 years of football and those types of things, and when we were celebrating that, and you know, had stories about Jack tackling a whole team at one time on a kickoff. So, yep. Anything else, guys, that you think's worthy of throwing out there and talking about, or?
Well, you mentioned the Eppleys. The only night baseball game that I ever remember Pana ever playing, I think we went to Mattoon one year. Jim Eppley was pitching. It was the only night game in baseball that we Blues had ever played in. And I think he pitched about a 1 or a 2 hitter that night, and we beat Mattoon 2-1 or 1-0 or something like that. It's a very low scoring game. So.
Yep. Well, you know, Pana has lost a lot of industry, and you know, at one time I don't know what Pana's fighting weight was as far as population goes, if they were 7,000 at one time or what, but I know you guys, you're part of that era where when it was Pana was thriving and chugging great guns, and I was just a little boy whenever the J.C. Penney's and those types of places, Woolworths, started closing their doors, and there's some good things that are going on in Pana now, where they're trying to recoup that, but you guys are still big and positive point, a part of that heritage in Pana. So,
Thanks, Al.
thank you.
Thank you.